The next patient is Virgil
Whittle. And I gave him rat poison in his dessert.
What kind of dessert?
It was a green pistachio pudding. I was surprised that the rat poison had worked so fast and that he turned blue within 5 to 10 minutes.
And I said, have you killed more than one person? And I asked him to tell me how many people was killed. And he said, you don't understand, I can only estimate. And I told him to, in his mind, pick a number that he knew it could not possibly go beyond. He said 70.
And when I went to pull back the sheet, he covered me in stool within his hand, and I smothered him to death.
How did you do that?
With a pillow. I wasn't going to take any more. I mean, I'd had enough. And when he put the stool in my face was the breaking point. Started me on the roller coaster, which I couldn't get off.
He didn't heal the sick. He chose who lived and who died. To most, medicine is a calling. But for Donald Harvey, nursing was the perfect disguise, a way to wield power over life and death. Beneath his calm, clinical exterior lay a predator who turned hospitals into his killing ground. For nearly 2 decades, his secret stayed buried. Why would a man trusted to care for the weak choose to destroy them? Was it mercy or something far more monstrous? Welcome to Dark Case Files, where we expose the darkest corners of true crime and bring you stories that demand to be told. Today we uncover the terrifying truth behind the so-called Angel of Death, Donald Harvey. Born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, Donald was the oldest of 3. His soft curls and wide brown eyes earned him the nickname Donnie from his parents Ray and Goldie. Shortly after his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a quiet Appalachian town where Ray worked as a tobacco farmer and Goldie managed the home. Poverty strained their marriage, but not their devotion to their children. Donald kept mostly to himself, quiet, unassuming. But somewhere beneath that silence, darkness was already taking root. According to later reports, between ages 4 and 20, Donald was sexually abused by at least 3 different men. One was his own uncle, another, a neighbor who paid him for sex. At 18, he claimed he was assaulted by a roommate. These traumas don't explain what he became, but for criminal profilers, they mark the early fractures in a dangerous psyche. He never fit in. At school, Donald was isolated, brilliant but antisocial. He avoided clubs and teams, choosing books over people. The same habits that earned him top marks also made him a target. The teacher's pet. After elementary school, he attended Boonville High, but dropped out in 1968 out of sheer boredom. By 16, he'd earned a GED from a correspondence school in Chicago. No ambition, no direction. He drifted to Cincinnati, Ohio, and found factory work, brief stability. But in 1970, the job dried up. Days later, his mother called. His grandfather was hospitalized back in Kentucky. She asked him to visit. He couldn't have known that stepping into Marymount Hospital would change everything, that the man he'd become would leave a trail of bodies in his wake. While visiting his ailing grandfather each day at Marymount Hospital, Donald Harvey charmed the staff with quiet manners and a willingness to help. They saw a polite young man eager to assist, a stark contrast to the chaos of the wards. Within weeks, he was offered a job as a nurse's aide. No medical degree, no formal training, just trust. That trust would cost lives. Some believe Donald took the job out of financial desperation after losing factory work. But money alone doesn't explain what happened next. In his new role, Harvey was left unsupervised for long stretches. He inserted catheters, changed bedpans, administered medications. Hours alone in private rooms with vulnerable patients, some conscious, some not. For a man craving control, it was the perfect hunting ground. For a while, nothing happened. Harvey performed his tasks, silent and unnoticed. But on May 31st, 1970, something inside him fractured. That night, he was tending to 88-year-old Logan Evans, a stroke victim confined to his hospital bed. When Harvey entered the room, Evans, likely disoriented, rubbed feces in his face. It was a degrading, chaotic moment. Most would have recoiled. Harvey snapped. With ice in his veins, he reached for a blue plastic bag and a pillow. He held them over the old man's face until the struggling stopped. Then, with methodical precision, he He listened to Evans' chest with a stethoscope. Silence. Satisfied, he removed the evidence, washed the body, changed the gown, and cleaned himself up. Then he called the nurses. No one questioned a thing.
Just one guy, he'd had a stroke. He had an IV in, and he got the IV out, and the sister told me to go and clean up the bed and change the IV, take it out because it was empty. And when I went to pull back the sheet, he covered me in stool within his hand, and I smothered him to death.
How did you do that?
With a pillow. I wasn't going to take any more. I mean, I'd had enough. And when he put the stool in my face was the breaking point. Started me on the roller coaster, which I couldn't get off.
The first kill didn't satisfy him. It awakened something. A day after smothering Logan Evans, Donald Harvey was assigned to care for another elderly man, 69-year-old James Tyree. The catheter Donald used was the wrong size, an error no trained professional would make. Tyree protested, cried out for him to stop. Donald didn't. Instead, he pressed the heel of his hand into the man's abdomen until Tyree convulsed and vomited blood. The cause of death was ruled an air embolism. Again, no one suspected murder. With two bodies behind him and no questions asked, Harvey grew bolder. Just 3 weeks later, he cut off the oxygen supply to 42-year-old Elizabeth Wyatt. She'd been terminally ill, and according to Donald, she had prayed aloud for death. He would later claim it was mercy. He watched her struggle for breath, then walked away. 4 hours later, she was found dead. No alarms, no suspicion. To Harvey, this wasn't just a job anymore. It was a stage. Over the next 10 months, 15 more patients under his care died, each death different, each method more grotesque. He smothered some with pillows. He tampered with oxygen tanks. He injected poisons, administered fatal overdoses, and sabotaged medications. If the hospital was watching, they saw nothing. His rage made him cruel. After a heated argument with a patient, Harvey returned to the room alone and shoved a coat hanger up through the man's catheter, puncturing his bladder and bowels. Infection took over. The man died days later in agony. Yet, through it all, Harvey called them mercy killings. To him, he wasn't a murderer. He was a benevolent force deciding when life should end. But behind the mask of compassion was something else entirely. A man who craved dominion over the helpless. A predator cloaked in scrubs, playing God in silence. March 31st, 1971, exactly 1 year after his first kill, was Donald Harvey's last day at Marymount Hospital. That night, drunk and disoriented, he was arrested for burglary. But in his drunken haze, he said something that should have frozen the blood of every officer in that room. He confessed to murder. Rambling, fragmented, unbelievable. The police dismissed it as nonsense from a drunk. Instead of facing charges for killing patients, Harvey paid a fine for petty theft and walked free. The system had missed its chance to stop a serial killer. For a brief time, it seemed like Harvey retreated into normalcy. He tried to piece his life back together. Months later, he landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. Then, in June 1973, he took a second job at Good Samaritan Hospital, working both positions without incident. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he left the medical field temporarily, working as a telephone operator and later a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas. During this lull, something changed. He stopped killing, or at least he managed to suppress the urge. Perhaps he lacked the privacy or access he'd once had. Or maybe the predator inside him was just waiting, watching for the right moment to re-emerge. That moment came in September 1975. Harvey moved across the state line to Cincinnati, Ohio. Within weeks, he was hired for the night shift at the Cincinnati VA Medical Center. His roles were many: nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, cardiac catheter technician, and even autopsy assistant. The title didn't matter. What mattered was the access, unrestricted, unsupervised, and deadly. With nightfall as his cover, Harvey picked up where he left off. Over the next decade, at least 15 patients would die by his hand. He kept a diary of death, gruesome records written in chilling detail. He poisoned desserts with arsenic-laced rat poison, smothered patients with plastic bags and wet towels, injected cyanide into IVs, mixed toxins into orange juice, administered lethal shots directly into the flesh. Each entry was a triumph in his mind, documented, cataloged, remembered. This was no longer mercy. This was methodical evil.
The next patient is Virgil.
Whittle. And I gave him rat poison in his dessert.
What kind of dessert?
It was a green pistachio pudding. I was surprised that the rat poison had worked so fast and that he turned blue within 5 to 10 minutes.
But Donald Harvey's depravity didn't stop with the kill. His murders were not acts of impulse. They were experiments, a twisted quest for perfection. While working nights, he studied medical journals, not to heal, but to learn how to hide death in plain sight. The science of subtlety became his obsession. Soon, cyanide became his weapon of choice. Silent, invisible, untraceable. He laced it into food, slipped it down gastric tubes. Patients died without a struggle, quietly, quickly, cleanly. Over the years, Harvey stockpiled an astonishing 30 pounds of cyanide, stolen in small amounts from the hospital, bit by bit. No one noticed, no one questioned. He kept the poison hidden at home like a secret arsenal, each gram a promise of death yet to come. His crimes weren't just continuing, they were evolving.
I started using morphine because it wasn't controlled that much in Kentucky, especially in small hospitals in the 1970s. And I did unplug a couple of ventilators. I used cyanide, I used arsenic, I used adhesive cleaner, a plastic bag too.
Were you experimenting, or was it just whatever was available?
I wanted the quickest method of death.
Despite the rising body count, Donald Harvey remained invisible. He staged every death to mimic natural causes: cardiac failure, stroke, respiratory distress. Nothing that raised alarms. To outsiders, it looked like tragic coincidence. To Donald, it was perfect execution. At the hospital, whispers began. They called him the Angel of Death and the Kiss of Death. Jokes, morbid nicknames. No one believed what they were saying out loud. They thought it was strange, even eerie, that so many patients died under his watch, but dismissed it as chance. No one saw the predator hiding behind the polite smile and steady hands. No one realized death wasn't following him. He was bringing it with him.
They didn't give me permission, no, but some of the patients didn't have no one to give permission for them. They didn't have a choice, and sometimes there was no family there to make that choice for them, and I made it for them. I was being the judge and the jury and executioner.
Although years down the line, Donald Harvey claimed his killings were acts of mercy. But by the 1980s, his actions told a different story. One rooted not in compassion, but in vengeance and control. Early that decade, Harvey began dating Doug Hill. Their relationship was volatile, marked by frequent arguments. After one particularly heated fight, Donald retaliated by lacing Doug's ice cream with arsenic. Doug survived. But this was the first time Harvey turned his lethal intent outside the hospital. The monster was now testing new boundaries. Soon after, Donald moved in with a new partner, Carl Hohler. The relationship began smoothly. But when Donald suspected Carl of infidelity, his control turned sinister. He began slipping arsenic into Carl's meals, just enough to keep him sick, too weak to leave the apartment. The poisoner had taken up permanent residence in their home. Donald's wrath expanded to anyone he believed had wronged him. After an argument, he dosed a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum. She barely survived. Another neighbor, Helen Metzger, wasn't so lucky. The arsenic Harvey baked into one of her pies killed her a week later. With each near miss and unnoticed death, Donald grew bolder, invincible. In April 1983, following a bitter dispute with Carl's parents, Donald began poisoning their meals too. A month later, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. Donald brought pudding laced with arsenic to his bedside. Henry died that night. Carl's mother, Margaret, became the next target. Donald poisoned her intermittently for over a year, but she survived. In January 1984, Carl ended the relationship and ordered him out. Donald couldn't handle rejection. Over the next 2 years, he attempted to kill Carl multiple times, each failure stoking deeper resentment. He even tried to murder one of Carl's female friends out of spite. Then came a critical turning point. On July 18, 1985, security guards at the VA hospital noticed Donald acting strangely. A search of his gym bag uncovered a .38 caliber pistol, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sawbraj. Instead of launching a full investigation, authorities let him quietly resign after fining him for carrying a firearm on federal property. Nothing was recorded in his employment file. No one asked about the trail of corpses he left behind. 7 months later, Donald was hired at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati. His charm and resume impressed them. They had no idea who they'd just let in. Donald picked up where he left off. In just 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients, killing by suffocation, injecting air into veins, disconnecting life support, and using arsenic, cyanide, even petroleum-based cleaning agents. The death toll soared, and no one noticed. Until March 7, 1987. 44-year-old John Powell had been on life support after a motorcycle crash, but was beginning to recover. That night, he died suddenly. Due to Ohio's mandatory autopsy law in vehicular cases, his body was examined, and what they found changed everything. The assistant coroner smelled bitter almonds, a telltale sign of cyanide. Authorities launched an investigation. At first, they looked at Powell's friends and family, no motives, no evidence. Then they turned to hospital staff. Donald Harvey's name appeared on the list. To eliminate suspicion, staff volunteered for polygraph tests. Donald agreed, then bought a manual on how to beat them. But on the day of his test, he called in sick. That alone was troubling. But what investigators uncovered next was worse. His disturbing nickname at the VA, Angel of Death, and a suspicious employment history filled with unexplained deaths. The mask had finally begun to slip, and now Donald Harvey was no longer a shadow in the corridors. He was the prime suspect in a 2-decade reign of terror. Donald Harvey was finally brought in for questioning. In the beginning, he was calm, controlled. He denied everything, insisting that John Powell's death was just another tragic coincidence. He played the victim, painting himself as a misunderstood caregiver, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But detectives weren't buying it. For hours, they worked him with classic good cop, bad cop tactics, tightening the psychological screws. Eventually, under the mounting pressure, Donald cracked. He admitted to injecting cyanide into John Powell's gastric feeding tube. His reason? He claimed it was out of pity for Powell and his suffering family. Even then, Donald maintained this was an isolated act, just one mercy killing. But the dam had broken. Investigators arrested him immediately, and what came next would stun even the most hardened detectives. On August 11, 1987, 35-year-old Donald Harvey sat down with investigators once again. This time, he began to talk, and he didn't stop. In a chilling, almost casual tone, he confessed to 33 murders spanning 17 years. But that number was just the beginning. As the days passed, the full horror of what he'd done came into focus. Donald revised the total to 70 murders, then later 75. Some claimed the number was even higher. At times, it seemed like even he had lost track. Authorities were stunned. No one could have imagined that such a quiet, well-mannered man had spent 2 decades quietly exterminating the most vulnerable people in society. Still, investigators needed to verify his claims. Could it really be true? Was this just the rambling of a narcissist looking for attention? Or had they just uncovered one of the most prolific serial killers in American history? Before any of it could be taken as fact, one critical question had to be answered. Was Donald Harvey sane?
Justice Center and sat down with Donald, and I said, have you killed more than one person? And I asked him to tell me how many people was killed. And he said, you don't understand, I can only estimate. And I told him to, in his mind, pick a number that he knew it could not possibly go beyond. He said 70.
Following a battery of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts, it was determined that Donald Harvey was fully sane. He knew right from wrong, and he chose wrong. He was perfectly capable of conforming to the law. In November 1987, Donald Harvey was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Marymount Hospital. Then, in February 1988, he pled guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati. For those, he received 3 more life sentences, plus 3 additional terms of 7 to 25 years. As for the rest of the staggering death toll, after 2 years, investigators closed the remaining investigations due to a lack of physical evidence. In other words, Donald Harvey took most of his secrets to the grave, but the public wasn't done with him. Whether people were sickened or morbidly fascinated, everyone wanted to know one thing. Why did he do it? In a rare 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Harvey gave a chilling glimpse into his mind. He said it all began with the desire for control. People controlled me for 18 years, and then I controlled my own destiny. For Donald, murder became power. Playing God wasn't just a fantasy, it was his daily reality. He decided who lived and who died. And for nearly 2 decades, nobody stopped him. Even in the twisted world of serial killers, Donald Harvey is a dark anomaly. Not just for his shocking kill count, which some estimate exceeded 80 victims, but for the sheer intimacy of his crimes. These weren't random strangers in dark alleys. These were patients, neighbors, lovers, people who knew him, people who trusted him. In a 2001 Associated Press article listing the worst serial killers in American history, Donald Harvey topped the list, surpassing even John Wayne Gacy. Everyone assumed Donald would rot in prison and die of old age, but fate had other plans. On March 28, 2017, inside his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, Donald Harvey was found badly beaten. He had been attacked inside protective custody, a place designed to keep him safe. He died 2 days later at age 64. The cause of death: blunt force trauma, skull fracture, brain damage. Months later, James D. Elliott, an inmate serving a 37-year sentence for burglary, confessed to the murder in a series of letters to the Toledo Blade. Elliott claimed he did it for justice, for the victims Harvey left behind. Hopefully, everyone from our area will take some solace in the fact that one of their own gave Harvey the punishment that he should have gotten from the courts. In September 2019, Elliott was sentenced to life in prison for the killing of the man once called the Angel of Death. To his very last breath, Donald Harvey claimed that most of his murders were acts of mercy. But mercy isn't murder, and Donald wasn't a savior. He was a predator who played judge, jury, and executioner over the lives of the vulnerable. Because no one stopped him, he believed it was his right. But how many did he really kill? Was it 37, 57, 87, or were there even more? Only one man knew the true number, and he took it with him to the grave. What do you think? Did Donald Harvey tell the truth about his victims, or was he just inflating the legacy of a monster? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this case as chilling as we did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Case Files for more deep dives into the darkest corners of human nature. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.